All right, so we're gonna do this?
Yeah.
Okay. Do it. One, if you were loading a gel or something, and it's filling, right, you put more volume. Try to talk about. And for some reason, I think all these things are part of why I am a scientist. I'm Sally Pasion, and I'm an associate professor of biology in the Department of Biology at San Francisco State. I am Filipino-American. Both of my parents came from the Philippines. I grew up in Watsonville, and so most of my friends were either Asian or Chicano. So I identify more with those groups because we didn't really get involved with the Filipino community when I was growing up. Both of my parents, neither of them were scientists formally. My mother had a 6th grade education, and once we were all grown up and she had the time, she helped my father as a janitor in the evening. I think that they were happy that I was deciding to go on and have a career in teaching. I think that, especially in my parents, they never quite understood what I meant when I wanted to do research and work in a lab and be a scientist. They did understand that when I said I wanted to be a teacher. And so that's how they explained my job to their friends, is, oh, she's a teacher. But they never quite understood the research part. So the research I do is basically studying how when a cell gets ready to divide into 2 cells, it makes copies of its genetic material, its DNA. And so I study in yeast cells, which are single-celled organisms, I study how they copy their DNA before they divide into 2 cells. I'm not sure if I chose yeast or if yeast chose me. I've always been interested in DNA, in the process of copying the DNA, in DNA replication. Probably the most important aspect is if we can understand how these single-celled organisms copy their DNA correctly at the right time during the process of dividing into 2 cells, then we can also learn how this is happening in our own cells, in human cells. In a lot of examples of various cancers, there are problems with that process of controlling when replication occurs, or even how correctly it occurs, because it can lead to mutations that can cause cancer. So I think there's a lot of health relevance in the work that we're doing. There are many people who have influenced me on this path that I have taken. Certainly, every teacher I ever had in high school, I had some amazing teachers who were very dedicated to helping me and other students. I had a high school counselor who basically pulled me out of class one day because he wanted me to apply to Harvard. And it never even occurred to me. I was thinking of joining the Army. I think that sort of opened my eyes to more opportunities. I think the biggest obstacle or challenge for me would first be myself, in just having doubts or not having the confidence that I could accomplish the next thing. And that's still a struggle. And I think the most important thing, which I found it hard to do even as a graduate student, and that is to always ask questions. Just because somebody tells you this is the fact, you can accept it, but I think it's more interesting to ask why. How do we know that? And I think it's very important to learn to ask questions as early as possible and not feel that it's a threatening thing. Because I think that it opens up a lot of doors. Simply being able to do an experiment and then finally getting it to work. I mean, I think that's Sometimes my favorite times is when it works, and sometimes the reality is when it does, all it does is give you more questions to ask. I think that if you have an interest in science, any opportunities to actually practice it by performing experiments and doing experiments, it gives you a better idea of whether this kind of approach interests you.